The ticket stub felt like stolen treasure in my pocket. I'd found it in the trash outside the Beaumont Grand Cinema, crumpled, discarded, still warm from someone's careless disposal. My fingers had traced the embossed lettering with reverence: Private Screening Room A, Seat 3, The Godfather, Director's Cut. Tonight, 8 p.m. I shouldn't have kept it. Shouldn't have smoothed out the wrinkles and tucked it carefully into my work uniform. Shouldn't have spent my entire shift cleaning the cinema while imagining what it would be like to actually sit in one of those leather recliners instead of scrubbing them. But I did. Because in the 6 months I'd worked as a custodian at the Beaumont Grand, I'd never once watched a film. I arrived after the last showing ended, cleaned through the night, and departed before the morning staff arrived. I existed in the spaces between entertainment, close enough to smell the popcorn and hear the muffled dialogue through walls, but never close enough to experience it. Tonight, though. Tonight I could experience it. The discarded ticket was my golden ticket, my one chance to see what I'd been cleaning, preserving, protecting for half a year. I knew it was wrong. Knew that if anyone discovered me, I'd lose my job. But the pull was too strong. I'd been listening to films through the walls for months, had memorized dialogue from dozens of movies despite never having seen the screen. So at 7:55 p.m., instead of clocking in for my shift, I slipped into the main entrance with the last stragglers. My worn jacket looked shabby next to the designer coats and expensive watches, but I kept my head down, my body small, my presence minimal. No one stopped me. The usher barely glanced at the ticket stub when I showed it to him, just gestured vaguely toward the grand staircase. Private screening rooms are on the 3rd level. Room A is down the left corridor. I nodded my thanks, the only response I could give, and climbed. My heart hammered with each step. The carpet beneath my feet was so thick I could barely hear my own footsteps. Art Deco sconces cast warm light across walls adorned with vintage movie posters in gilt frames. This was a different world from the back hallways I cleaned, the service elevators I used, the supply closets where I ate my sad lunches alone. This was where the wealthy came to watch films in luxury, where alphas in $1,000 suits brought their perfectly poised omegas to private screenings in rooms that cost more than I made in a month. I didn't belong here. But for tonight, for 3 hours, I could pretend. Screening room A was at the end of a private corridor, marked with a brass placard that read Times Bielmo Family. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just any private room. This was the room. The one reserved for the family who owned the cinema, who'd built this palace of film with old money and older prestige. I should have turned around, should have realized my mistake. But the corridor was empty, and through the partially open door, I could see the massive screen. Could see the plush leather recliners arranged in stadium seating, the small bar stocked with expensive liquor, the vintage film posters that decorated the walls. Just one look, I told myself. Just a glimpse from the doorway, then I'd leave. I pushed the door open. The screening room was stunning. 12 leather recliners arranged in 3 rows of 4, each one wide enough to fit 2 people comfortably, a fully stocked bar along the back wall, vintage candy in glass jars. Programs for tonight's showing laid out with military precision, and completely empty. I checked my watch. 7:58. 2 minutes until the film started. Maybe they weren't coming. Maybe the Beaumonts had decided not to attend tonight's screening. Maybe this room would sit empty, all this luxury wasted while I scrubbed floors 3 levels below. My feet moved before my brain could stop them. I crossed to the front row, to seat 3, the one listed on my stolen ticket. I sat down, slowly, reverently, like I was lowering myself into a throne I had no right to occupy. The leather was softer than anything I'd ever touched. The view of the screen was perfect, center, elevated, unobstructed. I could see the curtains that would draw back when the film began, the speakers hidden in the walls, the projection booth window at the back. The lights began to dim. I should leave, should run before. The door opened behind me. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up with terror. Footsteps, not 1 set, 3. "Told you we should have left earlier," a voice said, deep, cultured, with an edge of amusement. "Now we've missed the pre-show drinks." "We have drinks here, Theron. We always have drinks here," another voice, this one warmer, more relaxed. "That's not the point, Alaric. The point is the ritual. The third voice stopped abruptly. There's someone in our screening room. My heart stopped. I turned slowly, knowing what I'd see, but hoping desperately that I was wrong. 3 men stood in the doorway. 3 identical men, if you only looked at the surface. Same height, same build, same aristocratic features that could only come from generations of selective breeding. But I looked deeper than that, always had, since my muteness forced me to read people through body language rather than words. The one on the left stood with military precision, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his expression controlled but his eyes sharp, assessing. That would be the one who'd spotted me Theron, if I'd heard correctly. The middle one carried himself with easy confidence, his tie slightly loosened, a half-smile playing at his lips like he found the world gently amusing. Alaric. The one on the right was quieter, more intense, his gaze locked onto me with unsettling focus, and I could smell his scent, even from across the room, cedar wood and old books and something wild underneath. The unnamed one, the one who hadn't spoken yet. All 3 were alphas. I didn't need to see their designation to know it. Their presence filled the small space like a physical force, making my omega instincts scream at me to submit, to apologize, to make myself smaller. I stood so fast the recliner's footrest snapped back with a loud thump. My hands moved automatically, signing my apology even though I knew they probably couldn't understand. I'm sorry. Wrong seat. Leaving now. Wait, the quiet one said, his voice cutting through my panic. Don't. I froze mid-step. He moved closer, and the light from the screen caught his face. You're the custodian. I've seen you. Late nights, when I come back to collect things I've forgotten. I stared at him, confused. The Beaumonts came back here after hours? Lysander, Theron said carefully. We need to take our seats. The film is starting. I know. Lysander's eyes never left mine, but he's already in one. Then he can move, Theron replied, though his tone held more curiosity than anger. He could, Alaric agreed, moving to stand beside his brother. But why should he? There are 12 seats. We only need 3. I shook my head frantically. My hands moved again, faster. Not allowed. I shouldn't be here. I'll go. Can you speak? Lysander asked gently. I shook my head. Sign language? I nodded, then shrugged helplessly. Most people didn't know it. I'd learned to carry a notepad for essential communication, but I'd left it in my locker, not thinking I'd need it while hiding in a stolen seat. Lysander pulled out his phone and typed something, then showed me the screen. Why did you come here? I gestured helplessly at the screen, then at myself, trying to convey, because I've never seen it, because I wanted to, because I'm an idiot who couldn't resist. Understanding dawned on his face. You work here, but you've never watched a film. I nodded. That's criminal, Alaric said, settling into the seat next to mine, seat 4. Sit down. You're blocking the view. I looked at him, startled. You heard him, Theron added, taking seat 1 in the front row. Sit. I looked between the 3 of them, searching for the trick, the cruelty, but I only found curiosity on Alaric's face, amusement on Theron's, and something intense and unreadable on Lysander's. Lysander sat in seat 2, leaving me and 3 between him and Alaric. The curtains began to draw back, revealing the massive screen. I sat down slowly, my entire body tense, waiting for them to change their minds, waiting for security to arrive, waiting for the dream to shatter. But the opening credits began to roll, and the 3 alphas flanking me simply watched the screen. And for the first time in my life, so did I. I forgot to breathe. The Godfather was everything I'd imagined and nothing I could have prepared for. The images were stunning on the massive screen. The sound wrapped around me from all directions. The story unfolded with such richness that I forgot I was watching actors, forgot I was in a cinema, forgot everything except the world on screen. And I couldn't make a sound, couldn't gasp or laugh or react vocally to the moments that made my chest tight with emotion. But I felt it all. Beside me, Lysander shifted. His hand appeared on the armrest between us, and before I could question it, he'd placed his phone there, the screen glowing softly. First film in a cinema? I picked up the phone with shaking hands and typed, First film ever. I've never watched anything. Never had the money or access. A pause. Then he typed back, How long have you worked here? 6 months. And you've never watched? I clean at night. After everyone leaves, I hear films through the walls sometimes. I felt rather than saw his reaction, a slight tensing of his shoulders, a soft exhale. He typed, "What's your name?" I hesitated. Giving my name made this real. Made me real to them, instead of just an interloper they'd graciously allowed to stay. But his eyes in the dim light were kind, curious, genuinely interested. "Cassian," I typed. "Cassian Vale." "Lysander Beaumont," he typed back. Then, with what might have been amusement, but you probably guessed that from the name on the door. "And the screening room," I admitted. "And the fact that you own the cinema. We don't own it. Our family does. We just pretend to have authority." I smiled before I could stop myself. Lysander saw it. Something in his expression softened. He took his phone back, and I thought the conversation was over. But then he leaned slightly closer and whispered, barely audible under the film's audio, "Watch. This next scene is perfect." On screen, the wedding began, and I felt tears burn my eyes at the beauty of it. Lysander's hand found mine in the darkness. I should have pulled away. Should have maintained proper distance between an Omega custodian and an Alpha who owned the building where I scrubbed toilets. But his hand was warm and steady, and when his thumb brushed across my knuckles, I felt seen in a way I'd never experienced before. So I held on. The film ended too quickly. The house lights came up, and reality crashed back in with brutal clarity. I was sitting in the Beaumont's private screening room, holding hands with one of them, smelling like industrial cleaner instead of expensive cologne. I dropped Lysander's hand and stood abruptly, nearly tripping over Alaric's feet. "I need to go," I signed frantically, even though they couldn't understand. My hands moved to my pockets, searching for a pen, anything to write with. "Cassian," Lysander stood too. "Wait." I shook my head, backing toward the door. "At least let us," Theron started. But I was already gone, slipping through the door and down the private corridor at a near run. Behind me, I heard voices conferring, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop. Because if I stopped, if I let them talk to me, I might hope. And hope was dangerous for someone like me. I made it to the service elevator before the tears started. Made it to the locker room before they fell. Made it to my knees in front of my locker before I let myself break. I'd touched something beautiful tonight, something I had no right to touch. And now I'd never be able to forget it. The next night, I arrived for my shift at 11 p.m., as usual. The cinema was empty, the last showing long over. The wealthy patrons departed to their homes and after parties. I clocked in, changed into my cleaning uniform, and went to work. The routine was familiar, comforting. Start on the 4th floor, work my way down, vacuum the private screening rooms first, wipe down the leather seats, restock the bars. When I reached screening room A, I hesitated. The door was closed. It was never closed. The rooms were left open for air circulation between cleanings. I opened it slowly. Inside, on the bar counter, sat a note written in elegant script. "Cassian, thank you for sharing The Godfather with us. We hope you'll share the next film as well. Seat 3 is yours every Friday night. L.T.A." Beneath the note, a membership card with my name printed on it. Cassian Vale, Private Screening Room A, Unlimited Access. My hands shook as I picked it up. This was impossible. This was too much. This was a trick. I set it down carefully and finished cleaning the room with meticulous precision. Left the card and the note exactly where I'd found them, and tried to convince myself I wouldn't come back. Friday arrived. I told myself I was going to work my regular shift. Told myself the card was a polite gesture I couldn't possibly accept. Told myself that showing up again would be crossing a line from which there was no return. At 7:30 p.m., I clocked in for my shift. At 7:45, I clocked out. At 7:55, I walked through the main entrance with the membership card clutched in my sweating palm. The usher recognized me this time. His eyebrows rose slightly when he saw my card, but he simply nodded. "Screening room A, Mr. Vale. Enjoy the film." Mr. Vale, not "Hey you" or "The cleaner," Mr. Vale. I climbed the stairs with my heart in my throat. Screening room A's door was open, and inside, all 3 Beaumont brothers were already seated therein in seat 1, Lysander in 2, Alaric in 4. Seat 3 sat empty, waiting for me. Lysander looked up when I entered, his entire face transformed with a smile that made my chest ache. You came. I nodded, not trusting myself to do anything else. Sit, Alaric said warmly. We saved you snacks, unless you don't like popcorn, in which case Lysander panicked and bought every concession option available. Lysander shot his brother a look that screamed betrayal. I couldn't help it. I smiled. There it is, Theron said quietly. I was starting to think last week was a fluke. I looked at him, confused. Your smile, he explained. It's quite something. Heat rushed to my face. I ducked my head and moved to seat 3 quickly before I could embarrass myself further. Lysander had his phone ready. He passed it to me with a message already typed. I'm glad you came. I was worried we'd frightened you away. I took the phone and typed back. You gave me unlimited access. That's terrifying. Because it's too much? Because I don't understand why. Lysander took the phone back. I watched his thumbs move across the screen with surprising speed for someone with his large hands. Because you love film the way we do. Because you work here but never got to experience it. Because sitting next to you during The Godfather was the most present I've felt during a screening in years. My breath caught. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed. Tonight's film was Casablanca, romance and sacrifice and impossible choices. Halfway through the first act, Lysander's hand found mine again in the darkness. This time, I didn't hesitate. I threaded my fingers through his and held on. On my other side, Alaric shifted. His arm came to rest on the back of my seat, not touching but present, protective. And Theron, in his seat to Lysander's left, glanced over at us with an expression I couldn't quite read. But it wasn't anger or disgust. It looked almost like satisfaction. The next 8 weeks passed in a blur of Fridays and films and slow, careful communication. The Beaumont brothers were relentless in their pursuit, though pursuit felt like too aggressive a word for what they did. They learned. Lysander downloaded 3 different sign language apps and spent his week studying. I'd been restocking the concession stand one Tuesday afternoon when he appeared, startling me so badly I dropped an entire box of candy. Sorry, he signed, then immediately helped me pick them up. I was looking for you. My heart hammered. Why? To practice, he signed. Then, more hesitantly, and to see you. I miss you, between Fridays. The admission made my breath catch. I typed on my phone, you see me every day. I work here. Seeing you work and seeing you are different things, he signed back. When you're working, you're invisible on purpose. I want to see the real you. This is the real me. The custodian. No. His signing was emphatic. The real you is the man who cried during Casablanca's ending, who laughed at the Marx Brothers, who held my hand in the dark like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain that those moments felt stolen, like trying on a life that didn't belong to me. But Lysander was patient. He sat on an overturned crate in the storage room and signed, Tell me about you, not your job, you. What do you love besides film? I hesitated, then typed, books, old architecture, rainy days, the smell of film stock, moments of perfect quiet. My foster father's laugh, I can't hear it anymore, but I remember the way his shoulders shook. You're a romantic, he signed, smiling. I'm practical, I corrected. You can be both, he stood, moving closer. I'm both. I love spreadsheets and quarterly reports, but I also love the way light moves through a film gate. I love efficiency, but I also love watching you discover something beautiful for the first time. The intensity in his eyes made me want to run and stay in equal measure. Why are you doing this? I typed. Why are you learning my language? Because communication shouldn't be one-sided, he signed. You've been adapting to our world your entire life. It's time we adapted to yours. Over the following weeks, Lysander appeared regularly during my shifts, never interrupting my work, just sitting nearby, signing practice phrases, asking questions, learning. By week 3, he could sign basic conversation. By week 5, he could discuss films with me in sign language, still slow, still with mistakes, but genuine effort. One evening, he showed up with dinner. real food, not vending machine snacks. You need to eat, he signed. I checked. You usually skip dinner on shift nights. I stared at the containers. You brought me food? Thai food. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got variety. We ate together in the empty break room, and Lysander signed questions between bites about my childhood, about my foster father, about how I'd ended up here. I told him about being abandoned at a hospital as an infant, already mute, about bouncing through foster homes until I was 14 and met James, my foster father, who'd looked at me and seen potential instead of defect. He taught me everything, I typed. About film, about preservation, about finding beauty in forgotten things. He said I had a gift for seeing what others missed. He was right, Lysander signed. You do. Theron's courtship was different. More practical, more structured, but no less thoughtful. The tablet appeared on a Wednesday, left in my locker with a note. For when sign language is too slow, we want to know your thoughts. All of them. T. It was top of the line, loaded with every communication app available. Text to speech, speech to text, note-taking programs designed specifically for nonverbal communication. But what made me cry was the wallpaper. A photo of the view from seat 3 in screening room A, the massive screen empty and waiting for magic. The next Friday, I typed to Theron during intermission, "Thank you for the tablet, it's too much." "It's exactly enough," he typed back. "You've been using that ancient phone to communicate. You deserve better tools. I can't afford to replace it if something happens. It's insured, extensively, and if anything happens, I'll replace it immediately. Stop worrying about cost and start thinking about what you want to say." So I did. Over the following weeks, Theron and I developed a rhythm of trading written thoughts. He'd send me articles about film theory, about restoration techniques, about the business of cinema. I'd send back my reactions, my opinions, my questions. One evening, he sent me a complex article about color grading in classic film restoration. I sent back a 5-page response, analyzing why certain choices preserved directorial intent while others betrayed it. "You have strong opinions about color science," he typed. "Is that bad?" "It's magnificent. Most people don't engage this deeply with technical aspects. You understand that art and science aren't separate, they're intertwined. Because my foster father taught me. He said every choice in film is both aesthetic and technical, that the magic comes from the marriage of the two." He sounds like he was brilliant. He was. He died before I could thank him properly, before I could tell him his lessons meant everything. Theron's response was immediate. He knew. Teachers always know when they've succeeded. They see it in their students. But it was Alaric's courtship that undid me completely. Books started appearing in my locker during week 2. Film criticism, screenwriting guides, photography collections, each with notes in his flowing script. The Phantom of the Opera Times came first, a beautiful, illustrated edition with textured covers I could identify by touch. Inside, a note. "For the man who works where stories come to life, but has never had time to read them. Change that. A." Then came novels that had become films times The Great Gatsby, To Kill a Mockingbird, 1984. The Shining Times, each with Alaric's notes comparing the page to the screen. "Sometimes the book is better," he wrote beside Times Gatsby. "Sometimes the film transcends the source. Usually, they're different animals entirely. Both valid. Both valuable." On week 4, he brought me a journal. Leather-bound, expensive, beautiful. "For your thoughts about films," he explained when I looked at him questioningly. "So I can understand how you see them." I typed, "You want me to write film criticism?" "I want to read your analysis, your interpretations, the things you notice that I miss." He smiled. "You experience film differently than I do. You watch with your whole body. I see you lean forward during tense scenes, relax during quiet moments, flinch at jump scares. You're not passive. You participate. I want to understand that. I'm not educated. I never went to film school. You had something better, a passionate teacher who taught you to love the medium. That's worth more than any degree." So I started writing. After every Friday screening, I'd fill pages with my thoughts, my reactions, my questions. And every week, I'd find Alaric's responses in green ink, continuing our conversation across the pages. You noticed the sound design in that scene, he wrote beside my analysis of Time's Apocalypse Now. Most people focus on the visuals, but you heard the way silence was used as a weapon. That's sophisticated viewing. I experience sound differently, I wrote back. Because I can't speak, I listen harder. I notice when sound is absent because absence is my normal state. That's not a deficit, he responded. That's a superpower. Each gift, each conversation, each moment taught me that being seen was both terrifying and exhilarating. On week 7, Alaric brought me something different. A dusty film canister. This was your foster father's, he said carefully. I stared at him, not understanding. I did some research. Found out he worked at a small cinema before it closed. The owner kept some of his personal effects in storage. This was labeled James' Personal Project. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside, a short film, 16 millimeters, homemade. The handwritten label read, For Cassian, on being seen. Tears spilled down my cheeks. There's a 16 millimeters projector in the vintage equipment room, Alaric said gently. Would you like to watch it? I nodded, not trusting myself to type. We went to the equipment room. Alaric set up the projector while I stood frozen, holding the canister that contained my foster father's voice. The film ran for 10 minutes. It was silent, no audio track, just images. James had filmed it himself, narrating through title cards. To my son Cassian, the first card read, You think being mute makes you less. I'm making this to show you different. What followed was a series of vignettes. Great silent film stars, Chaplin, Keaton, Lloyd, performing miracles of communication without words. Then modern mimes, dancers, visual storytellers. The final title card, Voice is just one language. You speak in images, in presence, in the way you make others feel. That's more powerful than any words. Never let anyone tell you you're broken, you're complete, you're seen, you're loved. Dad, I fell to my knees, sobbing. Alaric held me while I broke apart, while 7 years of grief poured out, while I finally let myself feel everything I'd been suppressing. He loved you, Alaric murmured into my hair. And he saw you, the way we see you. How did you find this? I finally typed when I could function again. I wanted to know who taught you to love film so purely. So I researched, made calls, tracked down records. He wiped my tears gently. I wanted to understand where you came from. Who shaped you? Because you're extraordinary, and I needed to know why. That's invasive. It is. And I'm sorry if it crossed a line. But I'm not sorry for finding this, for giving you back a piece of him. I kissed him then, desperate and grateful and overwhelmed. And when we broke apart, I signed to Lysander's teachings. Thank you. Always, Alaric said. And every Friday, seat 3 waited for me. We developed a routine. I'd arrive at 7:55. They'd be waiting with snacks and conversation conducted through Lysander's increasingly fluent signing, through typed messages on the tablet, through shared glances and soft touches that spoke louder than words ever could. We'd watch films together. Lysander would hold my hand. Alaric would lean close to whisper context I might be missing, his breath warm against my ear. Theron would watch me watching the screen, and sometimes I'd catch him smiling. And after, they'd ask if I wanted to get food. I always signed no, always slipped away before they could press. Because accepting dinner felt like crossing a line. Accepting their courtship, and that's what this was, I couldn't pretend otherwise, felt like setting myself up for inevitable heartbreak. But they were patient. Until week 9, when everything changed. I arrived at the cinema at 7:55 as usual, but when I reached screening room A, it was empty. No snacks laid out, no brothers waiting. Panic seized my chest. Had they finally realized this was ridiculous? That courting a mute Omega custodian was beneath them? That the novelty had worn off? I stood in the empty room, holding the tablet Theron had given me, and tried not to cry. Then the door opened. Lysander stood there, slightly breathless, his perfectly styled hair mussed. I'm sorry, he signed. Emergency. Come with me? I frowned. Where are your brothers? Downstairs, projection booth. Please. He held out his hand. I took it. He led me through the private corridors, down a service staircase, through doors marked staff only until we emerged in the main projection booth. Chaos. The projectionist pacing frantically. Theron on his phone. Alaric examining equipment with a furrowed brow. Completely fried, the projectionist was saying. The backup system, too. We can't show anything tonight. We'll have to refund everyone and cancel. How many people? Theron asked. Full house. 300 people who paid premium prices for opening night. I understood immediately. Tonight was supposed to be a special screening, a classic film festival premiere that had been sold out for weeks. Lysander pulled me aside, signing, "The digital projection system failed, both primary and backup. We can't show the film digitally." What film? Singin' in the Rain. The restored 70mm print just arrived from the archive. It's the main attraction. I typed quickly. You have 70mm projection capability? Yes, but we haven't used it in years. The equipment is temperamental and I can do it. All three brothers turned to stare at me. Theron spoke first. You know how to run a 70mm projector? I nodded, typing. My foster father was a projectionist before cinemas went digital. He taught me on old equipment. I used to help him with classic film screenings. When? Alaric demanded. Before he died. 7 years ago. But I remember. I could try. The equipment is ancient, the projectionist warned. Finicky. One wrong move and you could damage an irreplaceable print. I typed, I'll be careful, but it's either I try or you cancel. Lysander, Theron, and Alaric exchanged one of their silent communication looks. Do it, Theron said. 20 minutes later, I stood in the projection booth, with my hands on equipment I hadn't touched in 7 years. The 70mm projector was beautiful, a massive machine from the 1960s, all chrome and precision engineering. The film itself was even more stunning, each frame enormous and detailed. My foster father's voice echoed in my head. Respect the film. It's survived decades to get here. Your job is to let it live again. I threaded the film carefully, my hands remembering movements my conscious mind had forgotten, checked the tension, aligned the gates, tested the feed. The brothers watched from the doorway. Are you sure about this? Alaric asked quietly. I gave him a thumbs up, then turned to the controls. The house lights dimmed below. I could see the audience through the window, 300 people settling into their seats, expecting magic. I started the projector. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the film caught, the gate closed, and light poured through 70mm of pure cinematic history onto the screen below. The image was breathtaking, crisp and colorful and alive in a way digital could never match. Through the booth window, I watched the audience react. Gasps of delight, applause at the opening credits. It's working, Lysander signed, appearing at my shoulder. I nodded, not taking my eyes off the film threading through the machine. I'd need to watch it constantly, ready to adjust if anything went wrong. You saved us, Theron said from my other side. I just ran a projector. You saved opening night, saved 300 people from disappointment, saved our reputation. His hand found my shoulder. You're remarkable. Alaric moved to my other side, all three of them flanking me in the small booth. How long can you stay? Alaric asked. I typed, the whole film. I need to monitor it, change reels, make sure nothing goes wrong. Then we'll stay with you, Lysander signed. You're missing the screening. We're not missing anything, Theron corrected. We're watching you work. That's more interesting than any film. So they stayed. All three of them crowded into the projection booth, watching me run the projector with the same attention most people gave to movies. When I had to change reels, a delicate operation that required perfect timing, they handed me tools, held film canisters, followed my signed instructions without hesitation. Where did you learn this? Alaric asked during a quiet moment. I typed quickly while monitoring the feed. Foster father. He loved film more than anything. Said movies were magic made mechanical. That our job as projectionists was to be invisible magicians. He sounds wonderful. He was. He's the reason I wanted to work at a cinema, to be close to what he loved, even if I could never afford to actually watch. Until now, Lysander signed. Until you. The final reel finished. The audience applauded. Through the window, I watched them stand, lingering to discuss what they'd seen. I powered down the projector carefully, rewinding the film with reverent precision. That was incredible, Theron said. I shrugged. Just doing what needed to be done. No, he turned me to face him. You did something remarkable. You saved tonight. You brought a piece of film history back to life. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Alaric finished for him. You proved you belong here, not as a custodian, as part of this place, part of what makes it magical. We want to offer you a job, Lysander signed. Real job. Film programming, preservation, teaching others about classic projection, whatever you want. I shook my head frantically. I can't. I'm not qualified. You just saved our opening night with skills most professionals don't have anymore, Theron interrupted. You're more than qualified. You're essential. I'm a custodian who got lucky. You're a custodian who's been invisible for too long, Alaric said firmly. We see you, Cassian. We see what you're capable of. And we're not letting you hide anymore. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist this was impossible, that I didn't deserve this. But the way they were looking at me like I was valuable, like I mattered, like I was scene made, the protests die in my throat. I need to think. I finally signed to Lysander. Take all the time you need. He signed back. But know this, whether you accept the job or not, you're still welcome in screening room A. You're still ours. That hasn't changed. Ours. The word settled into my chest like a key finding its lock. I called in sick for the next 3 days. Sent a text to my supervisor, holed up in my tiny apartment, and tried to process everything. The job offer was tempting. Terrifying, but tempting. Working with films, with preservation, with the history my foster father had loved, it was everything I'd secretly dreamed of. But accepting meant believing I deserved it. Meant trusting that the Beaumont brothers' interest was genuine. Meant hoping. And hope terrified me more than anything. My apartment felt smaller than ever. 400 square feet of peeling linoleum and water-damaged walls. A hot plate instead of a stove because the landlord was too cheap to fix the broken range. A bathroom so small you couldn't open the door all the way if you were standing at the sink. One window that overlooked a brick wall and let in exactly 47 minutes of direct sunlight per day. I'd counted. During the first week after I moved in, when I was trying to convince myself this was temporary. That had been 3 years ago. I spent day one in bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like a film reel if you squinted, trying to logic my way through the situation. The Beaumont brothers were wealthy, educated, connected. They could have anyone, any omega, any partner, any employee. Why would they choose a mute custodian who'd learned film preservation from a dead man's lessons instead of from university? Day 2, I made the mistake of looking at my phone. 23 missed calls from Lysander. 37 texts from Theron. A voice message from Alaric that I played once, then immediately deleted because hearing his voice say, "Please just let us know you're okay," made my chest hurt too much. And one text from all 3, sent from Lysander's phone at 3 a.m. "We understand if you need space. We understand if we push too hard too fast. But please, let us know you're safe. We won't contact you again if you don't want us to. But we need to know you're alive. Please, Cassian." L.T.A. I typed back, "I'm fine. Just need to think. I'm sorry for worrying you." Lysander's response was immediate. "Don't apologize. Take all the time you need. But know we're here, whenever you're ready. Or, if you're never ready, we'll understand that too." The patience, the understanding, the complete lack of pressure, it should have comforted me. Instead, it made everything worse. Because demanding alphas who tried to force me into decisions, those I knew how to handle, I could reject them, could protect myself with righteous anger. But patient, understanding alphas who gave me space and told me they'd accept whatever I chose, that was terrifying, because it meant the choice was actually mine, and choosing wrong would be my fault. On day 3, I tried to make a plan. Option 1, go back to custodian work, quit the Friday screenings, return to invisibility, where I was safe. I opened a new job search browser tab, stared at it for 20 minutes, couldn't make myself type anything. Because going back to invisible meant giving up everything I'd discovered, that I could connect, that I could be seen, that three alphas could look at me and see someone worth courting. Option 2, accept the job but decline the courtship. Keep things professional. I lasted 5 minutes imagining this before my chest got tight and I had to stop. Because sitting in screening room A with them, but pretending we were just colleagues, watching films while trying not to feel Lysander's hand reaching for mine, that would be torture. Option 3, accept everything. The job, the courtship, the terrifying possibility that this was real and I deserved it. I couldn't even imagine this option properly. Every time I tried, my brain shut down with panic. On day 4, someone knocked. I ignored it, pulling my pillow over my head. The knocking continued. Patient, persistent, refusing to give up, even when I didn't answer. Finally, I dragged myself out of bed, still wearing the same clothes I'd been in for 2 days, and opened the door. Lysander stood there looking like he hadn't slept since I'd left. Suit rumpled, hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes that made him look haunted. Our eyes met, and something in his expression crumbled. "You've been hiding," he signed, his movements slower than usual, tired. I stepped back to let him in because turning him away felt impossible, even though every instinct screamed at me to protect myself. The contrast was brutal. Him in his $1,000 suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, me in my $100 apartment that smelled like mildew and old takeout, him smelling like expensive cologne and cedar, me smelling like 3 days of not showering. Everything about the moment screamed that we didn't belong in the same world. Lysander looked around once, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the flickering light bulb I couldn't afford to replace, the single chair that wobbled because one leg was shorter than the others. His expression stayed carefully neutral, but I saw the moment he noticed the completely empty fridge through the open kitchenette, the moment he realized I'd been living on vending machine, food, and water. "Why did you run?" he signed. I grabbed my tablet from the rickety table that served as both desk and dining surface. "Because this doesn't make sense. You're Beaumont's. I'm a custodian who lives in a place where the heat barely works and the neighbors scream at 2 a.m. The job offer, the courtship, all of it, it has to be charity, or pity, or guilt. Stop." His signing was sharp, almost angry. "Stop deciding what this is based on what you think you deserve. That's easy for you to say. You've never had to. Never what? Been judged? Been dismissed? Been treated like we don't matter individually?" His hands moved with increasing emotion. "We're triplets, Cassian. Do you know what that's like?" I shook my head slowly. He sat heavily on my lumpy couch, the only place to sit besides the bed, and signed with exhausted precision. "People have been treating us like we're the same person our entire lives. Teachers couldn't tell us apart. Business partners made bets on which one was which. Potential partners dated us like we were interchangeable parts." I sat beside him, listening with my eyes the way I'd learned to do. "Theron became controlling to differentiate himself," Lysander continued. "If he could be the one making decisions, the one in charge, at least he was distinct. Alaric became charming, to be memorable. He could make people laugh, make them feel special, make them see him as a person instead of a copy, and I became quiet because at least silence was individual. If I wasn't talking, I couldn't be compared." His hands dropped to his lap for a moment before continuing. "Then you sat in our screening room," he signed slowly, "and you didn't see 3 identical alphas trying to prove their individuality. You saw us, separately. You responded differently to Theron's structure, to Alaric's warmth, to my silence. You treated us like 3 complete people, not like variations of the same person." I typed, "I didn't know you felt that way. You all seem so confident, so sure of yourselves. We're excellent at performing." He signed with a sad smile. "We've been doing it our whole lives, but with you, we don't have to perform. You see through the masks because you can't rely on words or surface charm. You read us through body language, through scent, through the tiny unconscious truths people reveal when they think no one's paying attention. That's just survival. When you can't speak, you learn to read people, or you get hurt. It's extraordinary," he signed emphatically. "And it's exactly why we're falling in love with you." My breath caught. He stood, moving closer, signing with gentle precision. "We're not doing this out of charity. We're doing this because you make us feel seen, because you bring magic, to what we do. Because sitting next to you during films makes them better, makes everything better. What if I can't be what you need? You already are, exactly as you are. Then he kissed me. Soft at first, questioning, giving me space to pull away. I didn't pull away. I kissed him back with everything I couldn't say, all the longing I'd been suppressing, all the hope I'd been too scared to feel. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. Is that a yes? He signed. I nodded. Good, because my brothers are in the car downstairs, and if I don't bring you back, they're going to storm up here. I laughed, a voiceless sound I rarely made. Lysander's expression softened completely. Come home with us. Home? We have a room ready for you, at our brownstone, if you want it, when you're ready. I grabbed his hand, held it tight, and let myself hope. The courtship that followed was like nothing I'd imagined. Theron structured my new position at the cinema film preservation specialist, with a salary that made me dizzy. He enrolled me in courses on film archiving and restoration. You have instinct, he explained. Now you need foundation, theory to support your practice. Alaric fed my passion. He took me to film festivals, to cinematheques, to private collections where I could see rare prints and meet preservationists who shared my foster father's reverence for the medium. You're not just a technician, he told me. You're an artist, a guardian of cultural memory. Lysander taught me that silence could be shared. We'd sit in the screening room after hours, watching films with his hand in mine, communicating through glances and small touches and perfect understanding. And every Friday, seat 3 was still mine. But now I sat there as an equal, as someone they wanted, not someone they were tolerating. 3 months after the projection booth incident, the Beaumont brothers asked me to dinner. Not at a restaurant, at their home. The brownstone was beautiful but not ostentatious, filled with film memorabilia and comfortable furniture and warmth. The 4th bedroom made my breath catch. It had been converted into a personal screening room, a professional-grade film projector 16 millimeters, not as large as the cinemas but perfect for home viewing, shelves lined with film canisters and books. A desk for writing my analyses. We weren't presuming, Theron said quickly. This isn't us demanding you move in. This is us offering space. If you want it, when you're ready. I walked to the projector, my fingers trailing over the familiar mechanisms. Why me? I signed to Lysander. Of all the Omegas you could have, ones who can speak, who fit your world, why me? Because you're real, he signed back. Because you don't perform for us. Because when you smile, it's genuine. When you're passionate about film, it shows. When you're scared, you don't hide it. Because, Theron added, you challenge us without trying. You make us see differently, appreciate what we took for granted. And because, Alaric finished, pulling me close, you're already ours. You have been since that first Friday. We just needed you to realize it too. I typed, I'm falling in love with all 3 of you. Is that allowed? It's required, they said in unison. Then they were kissing me, Lysander first, then Alaric, then Theron. Move in, Lysander signed. Let us take care of you. What if I fail? You won't, but if you stumble, we'll be there to catch you. I looked at these 3 impossible alphas who'd seen through my invisibility, and I signed, okay. The proposal came 6 months later. We were in screening room A, where else? Watching Time's It's a Wonderful Life. A fitting choice, Alaric had said, for the Christmas season. I sat in my usual seat 3, flanked by my alphas, holding Lysander's hand in the darkness while Alaric's arm rested across the back of my chair and Theron's presence warmed me from 2 seats over. This had become my normal, my life, my family. At the point where George Bailey stands on the bridge, ready to jump, when Clarence shows him what the world would be like without him, the film stopped. I looked at Lysander, confused. He gestured to the screen with a small smile. New images appeared, not the film, photos of us. The first, me in screening room A, that very first Friday, caught from behind as I watched the opening credits of The Godfather. I hadn't known Alaric had taken it. Then more, us in the projection booth, my hands on the 70 millimeters projector while all 3 watched, at the brownstone, laughing at something Alaric had said. At a film festival, me signing animatedly about a restoration I'd seen. In the editing room, where I'd started teaching preservation techniques to new staff. Hundreds of photos documenting a year of being seen, being loved, being home. Then words appeared on the massive screen. Cassian Vale, you sat in the wrong seat and found exactly the right place. Will you bond with us? Will you be ours forever? L. T. A. I turned, my heart hammering. All three brothers were kneeling Theron in the aisle, Alaric half standing at his seat, Lysander on one knee beside me. It should have been awkward in the cramped screening room. It should have looked ridiculous. It looked perfect. Lysander held out a small box, opening it to reveal 3 rings. Not traditional Omega-claiming bands, thick, possessive things that screamed ownership. These were delicate, artistic pieces of jewelry. Each band featured a tiny strip of actual film negative embedded in clear resin, the frames barely visible but unmistakably real. When light hit them, miniature images appeared, frames from The Godfather, Casablanca, Singin' in the Rain. Our Fridays, preserved forever. We know this is unconventional, Lysander signed, his movements careful and deliberate. We know people will judge 3 alphas, bonding 1 omega. We know there will be complications and legal hurdles and people like Montgomery who will never accept it. Theron took over speaking. But we also know that you are ours, not as possession, but as partner, as equal, as the person who completes us in ways we didn't know we were incomplete. We know, Alaric added, his voice warm and certain, that we are yours, all 3 of us, completely and forever, in whatever way you'll have us. Lysander signed the question again. Will you bond with us? Will you be our omega? Will you let us be your alphas? I looked at the 3 of them, these impossible alphas who'd learned my language, who'd given me purpose, who'd taught me that love didn't require voice. My hands shook as I signed my answer. Yes, always, completely, forever. The kiss happened in a rush, all 3 of them surrounding me, lips and hands and overwhelming love that made my chest feel too small to contain it all. When we finally broke apart, Lysander was crying. Theron was smiling wider than I'd ever seen. Alaric was laughing with pure joy. We're getting married, Alaric said to no one and everyone. We're actually getting married. When? I signed. Whenever you want, Theron replied. Tomorrow, next year. We'll wait as long as you need. I typed on the tablet that was never far from reach. 1 year from today, the anniversary of the first Friday. Here. In the screening room? Alaric looked delighted. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And it was. The bonding ceremony was held in Screening Room A on a Friday night exactly 1 year after I'd sat in the wrong seat. Just us, an officiant who specialized in non-traditional bonds, and Mrs. Martinez, the head projectionist who'd mentored me for the past year, who'd looked at me on my first day in the booth and said, "You've got the touch." James would be proud. She'd known my foster father, had worked with him decades ago at a different cinema before he'd moved on, before he'd died. The connection felt like a gift, like James was there in spirit. The screening room had been transformed. The usual stadium seating remained, but the first few rows had been cleared to create space. The massive screen showed a slow montage every film we'd watched together over the past year and a half. Not just the images, but photos of us watching them. The evolution of our relationship told through stolen glances and held hands and gradual closeness. Candles lined the aisles, their flames flickering like trapped stars. Film strip confetti, actual strips of damaged film stock too degraded to preserve, scattered across the floor in silver spirals. The projection booth window glowed warmly, Mrs. Martinez silhouetted as she managed the visual tribute. I wore a suit Theron had commissioned from his personal tailor, charcoal gray, with the subtlest film reel pattern woven into the fabric, visible only when light hit correctly. The tailor had been patient, had learned basic sign language just to fit me properly, had created something that made me feel genuinely beautiful. The brothers wore complementary suits, Theron in midnight blue with silver threading that caught light like a projector beam, Alaric in warm brown with gold accents that reminded me of aged film stock, Lysander in deep green with copper details that looked like patinated film canisters. They looked like they'd stepped out of Hollywood's golden age. I looked like I belonged beside them. The realization no longer felt impossible. The officiant, Dr. Chen, a beta woman who'd bonded many unconventional triads, smiled at us with warmth. "We're gathered in a temple of stories," she began, "to witness a story of love that transcends traditional narrative. Cassian Vale, Lysander Beaumont, Theron Beaumont, and Alaric Beaumont have chosen to write their own script, to direct their own production, to create something entirely new." She looked at each of us. "Society often treats bonds like they should follow formulas, predetermined outcomes, expected structures. But true love is more like filmmaking. It requires vision, collaboration, courage to try something that's never been done before. These four have that courage." I felt Lysander's hand find mine, Theron's steadying touch on my shoulder, Alaric's warmth beside me. "Cassian," Dr. Chen said gently, "you've chosen to express your vows through movement rather than words. Are you ready?" I nodded, my heart racing. I'd worked with a movement coach for weeks, translating everything I felt into choreography. Now, I performed my vows. I faced Theron first, moved toward him with controlled, deliberate precision that mirrored his structured approach to life. I signed, "You taught me that discipline isn't imprisonment, it's the framework that makes freedom possible, that rules create safety for exploration. That knowing who you are and standing firm in that knowledge is the truest form of strength." Then I showed it through movement-controlled steps that suddenly burst into wild, joyful expression, demonstrating how his structure had given me permission to be chaotic within safe boundaries. Theron's jaw clenched, his eyes bright with tears he was too controlled to let fall. I turned to Alaric. Everything about my body language shifted, softer, more playful, filled with spontaneous joy. I signed, "You taught me that beauty isn't luxury, it's necessity. That art isn't escape, it's the most honest truth we have. That loving freely, passionately, without reservation is the bravest thing a person can do." My movements became dance-like, spinning and reaching like someone experiencing wonder for the first time, showing how his warmth had melted defenses I didn't know I'd built. Alaric didn't try to hide his tears. Finally, Lysander. I approached with the quiet intimacy we'd always shared. No grand gestures. Just small, deliberate movements that spoke of profound understanding. I signed, "You taught me that silence isn't emptiness, it's the deepest form of presence. That being seen doesn't require being heard. That love exists in spaces language can never reach, an understanding that transcends words." I stood before him, took his hands, and simply held his gaze. Let the stillness say everything. Lysander pulled me close, his forehead against mine, and I felt him shake with emotion. Dr. Chen allowed the moment to settle before continuing. "Lysander, Theron, Alaric, your turn." Lysander went first, signing every word as he spoke it aloud. "Cassian, you entered our lives by sitting in the wrong seat, and you've been in exactly the right place ever since. I vow to spend every day learning your languages, not just sign, but the language of your silences, your subtle gestures, your presence. I vow to be an alpha who listens with more than ears, who sees with more than eyes, who loves with more than words. I vow to love you exactly as you are mute, brilliant, extraordinary, completely and forever." Theron spoke next, his voice steady despite visible emotion. "I vow to build us a life where structure supports rather than constrains you, where you have foundation to soar from, never walls to limit you. I vow to protect what we have with everything I possess, to fight for your right to be seen and valued for exactly who you are. I vow to be your anchor when you need stability and your catapult when you need to fly." Alaric finished, voice breaking beautifully. "I vow to show you beauty every single day, to remind you that you are art made flesh, magic made tangible. I vow to fill your life with wonder and joy and all the experiences you were denied. And I vow to love you so thoroughly, so obviously, so completely that you never again question whether you deserve it, because you do. You always have. You always will." Tears streamed down my face. "Then, by the power vested in me, Doctor," Chen said warmly, "and in witness of this cinema, which has sheltered your love from first Friday to forever, I declare you bonded. You may seal your union." We kissed there in front of the screen, showing our history, all four of us in turns. Then together in a tangle of love and promise. The claiming marks came later. in the privacy of the brownstone bedroom that had truly become ours. They'd prepared everything with meticulous care, candles for ambiance, soft music, medical supplies nearby just in case. Everything designed to make my first time being claimed as gentle and comfortable as possible. Because despite everything, despite months of courtship, despite the deepening bond, despite sleeping in the same bed, I was still a virgin omega, still unclaimed, still terrified of the vulnerability that claiming required. We go at your pace. Lysander signed, hands gentle on my face. If you need to stop for any reason, at any moment we stop. Your comfort and consent matter more than tradition or biology or anything else. Theron added softly, this is about completing the bond because we all want it, not because society expects it. If you're not ready tonight, we wait. We have forever. And, we'll take care of you, Alaric promised, lips brushing my temple, the way you've always deserved. When they finally claim me, each alpha taking turns, they're claiming bites on my scent glands, sending cascading waves of pleasure and completion and rightness through my entire body. The sensation overwhelmed me in the best possible way. Not painful, not frightening, perfect. And when the bonds finally snapped into place, when I could suddenly feel their emotions flowing through me like three distinct rivers joining into one vast ocean, when I understood on a fundamental, soul-deep level that I would never be alone again, I was complete. 1 year later, I stood in the projection booth preparing for the most important screening of my career. Not just a screening, a festival. The James Chen Memorial Classic Film Festival, named for my foster father, funded by the Beaumont Family Foundation, programmed entirely by me. 2 weeks of restored classics shown the way they were meant to be seen, on film, with care, with reverence, with love. Tonight was opening night, the premiere screening of a newly restored 70mm print of Lawrence of Arabia that had taken me 6 months to oversee personally. 300 people waited in the seats below. Film critics, preservationists, students, cinema lovers who'd traveled from across the country. And in screening room, visible through the booth window, my 3 bonded alphas sat in our usual seats, waiting. I felt their emotions through our bond, Theron's steady confidence in my abilities, Alaric's bubbling excitement, Lysander's quiet pride. The support wrapped around me like armor. Mrs. Martinez appeared at my shoulder. Nervous? I nodded, my hands moving to check the threading for the 10th time. James would be so proud, she said softly. Not just of your technical skill, but of you, of how you've grown, of how you've claimed your space in this world. I smiled, blinking back tears. She squeezed my shoulder. Ready? I gave her a thumbs up. The house lights dimmed below. I placed my hands on the projector, this beautiful 70mm machine that had become an extension of myself, and started the film. Light poured through celluloid, transforming into images on the massive screen. The desert unfolded in stunning detail, every grain of sand visible, every color rich and true. Through the booth window, I watched the audience react, gasps of wonder, leaning forward in their seats, complete attention. This was magic. This was what James had taught me. This was home. Lysander appeared at my side, signing, "You did this, all of this, the restoration, the festival, giving hundreds of people this experience. You." I shook my head. "We did this, all 4 of us." Theron joined us, his arm sliding around my waist. "You're being modest. This is your vision made real." "We just provided resources," Alaric added, appearing on my other side. "You provided the heart." I leaned into them, feeling the bonds hum with love and certainty and perfect rightness. On screen, Lawrence rode across the desert toward his destiny. And I stood in the projection booth with my 3 alphas, living mine. I'd spent so many years believing I was broken, believing that being mute made me less, believing I didn't deserve to be seen or heard or loved. But I'd learned the truth. Voice wasn't about sound, it was about being understood. And I was understood, completely. By 3 impossible alphas who'd learned my language, who'd seen through my invisibility, who'd taught me that love transcends words. I'd found my voice after all. Not through speaking, but through doing what I loved, with people who loved me, creating beauty and preserving history and honoring the man who'd first taught me to see magic in forgotten things. That was more than enough. That was everything. Thank you for joining Cassian Vale's journey from invisible custodian to celebrated film preservationist. If this story of wrong seats, triplet alphas, and finding voice through silence touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more BL Omegaverse stories. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest. Was it the projection booth, save, the proposal screening, or the final festival? Until next time, remember, sometimes sitting in the wrong place leads you to exactly where you belong.